Before we are going to discuss the topic what is batch apex, we have to discuss about few governance limits in Salesforce.com. So basically, let's take one scenario. You have 1 lakh records and you want to delete those things or you want to clean up those. Through DML statement, you can't delete because one DML statement can process 10,000 records only. You will get limit exception. And if you want to delete still, you can delete, but you have to run or you have to write a SQL query with a limit 10,000 records and you have to delete. In that way, how many times you have to delete? Just imagine. Okay, good. So for delete 1 lakh records, it is good. And coming to data loader. Through data loader also, you can delete records. So through data loader, you can delete 5 lakh records. But in our case, we have only 1 lakh records. So we can delete. But if we want to update with a different logics and different process in background based on different conditions, then how can you do? Through data loader. If it is a simple update, just one column update, done with the same values. On 5 lakh records or 1 lakh records, if you want to have a different logic for different kind of record settings or different kind of record filters or criteria, then how can you do with the data loader? Then you have to go through the code. And one more thing, let's come back to delete only. For now, we have 1 lakh. But if I have more than 5 lakh records, how can you delete through data loader? You are going to execute multiple times. But you have to wait until 5 lakh records deleted. Right? So, in these cases, whenever you don't have the possibility on to overcome your limitations in the Salesforce and to update with the different criteria, to delete the records which are having up to 50 million records, you can go through the batch apex. Okay, then if you want to, first of all, batch apex is the apex class. But if you want to make a class as a batch apex to work with up to 50 million records, to process up to 50 million records, you have to implement an interface Database.Batchable, which contains 3 methods: start, execute, finish methods. Okay, let's see. These are all the methods involved in the interface, which you interface that is Database.Batchable interface. And in start method, what is going to happen? Basically, start method with the database.queryLocator return type or iterable return type. In our example, we are going to have database.queryLocator return type for start. Because if you use iterable, again, it is going to respect the limitation of SQL query, which can retrieve 50,000 records only. But if you use database.queryLocator, it overcomes the limitation of 50,000 records. It can retrieve or it can work with 50 million records. Okay, and start method, what is going to happen? Start method collects all the records based on the query in the start method, and it will retrieve all the records from the system. And then it passes the records into the execute method to process all the records into batches. For example, if you let's take 1000 records, okay, just to divide easily. So by default, this execute method will take 200 records for every batch. Basically, what batch apex will do? Okay, batch apex will divide your records into different batches for processing. So how can it divide the records into batches through execute method? Okay, this execute method will divide the records into processing the records into batches, and for every batch it takes 200 records by default. You can increase those things also with the scope variable when you are executing the batch method, batch apex or batch class. So let's talk about execute method. Okay, start method will run only once and it retrieves all the records and it passes the records into the execute method. Execute method will run multiple times according to the batch size. By default, if you are not passing the batch size or scope, then it will take the 200 records and it will execute that many times. If you have 1000 records, then it will divide the 1000 records 200, 200, 200, 5 batches. Okay, and 5 times it will execute and it will process the records according to your logic you written in the execute method. Okay, so now, and this execute method, will have two parameters. One is database.virtual context and list of as object. Okay, that means basically in start method also you will have one parameter, that is database.batchable context. It holds the context of your batch. Okay, and it holds the batch job ID, these kind of things. Batchable context, your batch apex context it holds. And start method will have only one parameter, database.batchable context, and execute method will have two parameters, database.batchable context and list of object. This list of as object will hold the records which is passed through the start method. Finish method. In finish method, what you are going to do, you are going to send an email or you are going to run another batch job after finishing this batch job. That means this finish method also called only once. Okay, after running all batches based on your number of records in the batch, okay, in your whole batch process, then it will call the finish method at last. After completing all batches, it will call the finish method. There you can write email processing, or otherwise you can invoke another batch also to process after this batch apex, after all batches completed. Okay, and in the batch job and in the batch apex, what I said is you can implement database.batchable interface to make a class as a batch job or batch apex to divide your records into different batches and process. And that is very important to write a batch apex. Not only this, okay, if you want to maintain the stateful or state of the a variable for every batch, then you have to implement database.stateful interface for batch job. Along with this, if you are planning to do callouts in the batch apex, then you have to implement database.AllowsCallouts along with the database.batchable interface. Okay, let's discuss about this. Let's see practically how we can work with the batch job. So I am going to create one Apex class which implements database.batchable interface. Let's see. So I'm going to create an Apex class. So let's talk about the scenario. Okay, I have opportunities in my system. I want to delete the opportunities. Okay, I want to delete the opportunities based on different criteria. For example, I may have scenario or use case. I want to delete the opportunities which are closed one or which are closed last, not closed one, which are closed last. Okay, from before 5 years, which are created before 5 years. That is the scenario. Then what I have, those opportunities are 5 million records, or otherwise I have 50 million records. Then how can we do? Through batch job. Okay, let's do. For now, in our example, what we are going to do? We are going to delete simply opportunity records. How we can see, how we can do through batch job. Let's see. So your batch job may be global or public. Okay, and now I'm taking global, delete opportunities, implement database dot batchable. As object. Now I'll take this, copy, paste. First thing is, this is the start method and this is execute method, this is finish method. Okay, you may not, you don't need to write all the time something here. No need of writing logic here. That means this method definition should be here, but you don't need to write something here. But as best practice, you always need to do post processing, sending emails about the process of your batch jobs. Okay, for now I'm creating, you have to return database dot get query locator. Here you have to write your query. Select. For now I need all opportunities. And I have to process opportunity records here. This object. Here delete records simply. List of as object. Okay, so now we have written a start method, okay, and which can retrieve the records up to 50 million records by using database.get query locator, and it returns the records into execute method. Okay, and if you have 1000 records, it will execute 5 times because it takes, or it divides the records into batches. For each batch it holds the 200 records. Okay, and if you define more than 200 records, it can take. Okay, but so whenever you are going to execute this batch job, you always need to remember one thing. Okay, so here I am telling that you can process 50 million records multiple times, right? But still it can process 50 million records, there is no doubt. But when it divides into batches, okay, into 200 records, here in the execute method will execute multiple times based on the number of batches, based on the records. Okay, for example, you have 200 records, but not only deleting, you have multiple operations in this execute method. Okay, like for under opportunity you have opportunity contact roles, and opportunity you have cases, all the kind of things. If you want to delete all the things, if it reaches the 10,000 records, then it hits the limitation. That means, okay, even batch job can process 50 million records. For every batch in the execute method, it respects the governor limits. That means whenever you have 200 records in your batch, per batch, if you have more calculations, you have to be aware that this execute method always respects the governor limits. That means you can process 10,000 records only, you can have 50,000 rows only, all the things you can, it enforces. Okay, so that's why even you are processing the 50 million records, you should know what you are doing in the execute method, and if you feel it is going to exceed the limitations, you have to reduce the scope of records in the execution of batch job. Okay, I will show you why executing this batch job, where you can define number of records to be processed. By default, it will take 200. If you feel your execute method have more than 10,000 records because of your bigger logic, in our case, only we are deleting opportunity records. But in the real time, you may have multiple things and a lot of business logic to delete other records also. So at that time, you have to limit the number of records to be processed. Okay, even you can process 50 million records, but you have to limit the limit the scope. Okay, scope means what number of records to be processed per batch. Okay, in each batch, in each execute method, Salesforce limitations will be applied. So you have to remember this. Based on that, you can pass the how many number of records to be processed per batch. Okay, so for now we don't worry. Now so this is my batch. Okay, so successfully I created batch job, okay, which implements database.batchable as object. Okay, here I took as object, right? You can have direct opportunity also, anything is same. Okay, so if you have a subject, you have to convert for few things. For delete, you don't need to convert. So now how can we execute this batch fix? Okay, so that is by using database.execute batch. Okay, and here you have to give your instance of batch class, okay, which implements the database.batchable interface. The second parameter is a scope. Scope defines how many number of records to be processed in your batch class per batch. Okay, for now I am giving 100. Okay, so if you see here all opportunities, I have 1000 records in my system. Okay, so that means if I give 100 here, how many times execute method will be there, will be executed? Okay, 10 times, right? So let's do. I am going to delete the records. Here I have already records. Okay, this is Salesforce textbook arg only, and now I am executing this batch job, and I just reloaded this debug logs also. I didn't execute yet. Okay, now so this is the debug level. Now I am going to click on this execute method. Okay, now it executed. Okay, and the scope is 100 records. Okay, if you are not giving, this is optional parameter. Whenever you want to define the number of records to be processed per batch, then only you have to give here. Otherwise you don't need to give, because it will take 200 records by default. Let's see. And you can see the Apex jobs in the setup also. Go to Apex job. So if you see that 10 total batches, 10 total batches processed 10. Okay, because I have 1000 opportunities, I gave scope as a 100. That's why it divides your records into 10 batches and processed. Process means what is the process here in our batch job? It is delete. Okay, this is how it will work. Let's see opportunity records here. And if you see in Apex jobs also, here you can see which class, which is the batch job, and job ID also you can see. Okay, this is how it will work. See, no opportunities here because we have deleted through batch job. This is how a batch works. And even in debug logs also, if you see here, serial batch apex range chunk handler chunk 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, 10. Okay, 10 times 10 jobs will be processed. Okay, so this here you can see clearly instead of going through debug log, because you have another one also, that here you can easily see that how many batches, how many total batches is there, and how many batches processed also, no failures. Okay, this is the way you can do. And if you want to send emails through batch job, you can go through the async job class. From there, you through this job ID you can send these details to the administrator in finish method. Okay, this is how it will work. And here if you see that when you are deleting the records, if you want to hold how many records are deleting, how many records processed, how many records are not processed, if you want to send that count in the finish method, okay, through this batch job, if you do, for example, global, okay, integer I equals 0. Okay, then here if you see here, if you are going to do I plus plus through or through for loop or something to count, okay, so for example I plus equal, in our case, records dot size. Okay, so what it is going to do, basically our understanding is it will give, okay, here 100 first batch, another 100, another 100. This I should have 1000 count, but when you run this batch job, it will have always 100, because this execute method always never maintain the state of this variable. Okay, this batch job never maintain the state of this variable. For every batch, it initialize the same value. Okay, it initialize the same value. Means it starts from the beginning and it holds this value always. So to hold that value, what you have to do, you have to maintain stateful, database.stateful. This is the interface. Then this I will hold the 1000 count, because it holds the count for every batch. But if you don't use, or if you don't implement database.stateful, it can't maintain that state until the end of another batch, until the end of all batches. Okay, this is how database.stateful works. And coming to database.AllowsCallouts, okay, this is also very important. Okay, sometimes you may have multiple records to be done for callouts also. Okay, then if you want to do the callouts in the batch apex, you have to implement this database.AllowsCallouts interface. Okay, and one more thing here, if whenever, see, this execute method will execute asynchronously. Okay, always it will execute asynchronously. So this is how batch job works. So let's recap everything. So first thing is, whenever you want to implement a batch apex, okay, you have to implement a class, you have to write a class which implements database.batchable interface. which contains start and execute and finish method. Start method runs once and collect all the records based on your query, and it passes the records into execute. And execute method, in execute method, records will be divided into batches, and for every batch, execute method will be executed, and you can process those records, and you can write which logic and which kind of things you want to process in the execute method. And we have to remember always in execute method, again governor limits will be enforced, and in finish method also will execute once. Okay, and this finish method will be useful for processing the post processing of completion of this batch job. Okay, this is how it works. And start method will have database.batchable context. It holds the context of your batch job. And the same way, execute method will have both two parameters. One is database.batchable context and list of subject. This list of subject holds the records which are passed through the start method, and finish method will have single parameter. There you can have emails, finishing emails, or otherwise you can start another batch. Sometimes you may have scenario. What is the use of calling another batch in the finish method? For example, whenever accounts are updated, I want to update the associated opportunities after completion of the update on account. Okay, so what I have, two batches I have. One is for account processing, another one is opportunity process, another batch job opportunity process, because of bigger scenarios. Okay, so what I have to do, first thing is I have to complete account process, then I have to start the opportunity process. Otherwise, opportunity is not going to have proper values from the account. In that case, what I do, I will process all the accounts first of all in the account process or account batch job, and then in the finish method of that account batch class, I am going to call opportunities batch class. Then in that way, you can chain your batch jobs also. Okay, this is how you can work with the batch Apex. Okay, through batch job, you can process 50 million records. Through Apex DML statement, you can process 10,000 records. Through data loader, you can process 5 million records. Okay, this is how you can work with